Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and we're going to be answering a question from our question answer portion. One of the audience members had a question of, are there any parallels or differences between China's historical antagonism with the West and its current relationships with countries like Iran and Russia? Well, I guess I would like to start off talking about how none of those countries actually wanted to have an antagonistic relationship with the West. Russia wanted to be a part of the European Union, it wanted to be part of NATO, it wanted to be best buds with the United States after the end of the Cold War. They really did their best to be westernized, and the West just wouldn't accept them. They did supposed shock therapy where they had rich oligarchs come in and just pillage Russia. If you look, a lot of the Russians aren't ethnically Russian. They were people external to Russia, even if they were born in Russia, who pillaged Russia for all of its resources and then left the country. And so Russia tried its absolute best to be a part of the West, and they were just completely screwed over in that relationship. Iran, they tried to balance the West and the East, and they did this by making deals with Russia and China while also trying to make deals with the United States. And the thing was, the United States just never kept its deals. They always backtracked. They always just did not keep their word. And China obviously really had a symbiotic relationship with the United States. They built their economy around being a producer of goods that the United States wants. And what they ended up realizing was the United States was just not a reliable partner. And that's what all the nations of the world are realizing right now. Even countries like Saudi Arabia are pivoting away from the United States. And so China decoupled itself to a large extent, and to a large extent unwillingly decoupled itself because the United States has been imposing various sanctions on it. But all three of these countries, they're in the situation they're in because of the fact that the West has pushed them together. I remember hearing about how Vladimir Putin told, I believe it was Biden before he was president, this was actually decades ago. He told him, like, listen, if you won't work with us, if you won't help us out, we're going to have to work with places like China and Iran. And Biden just laughed at him and said, fine, you want to work with the Chinese and Iranians, go right ahead. And like, he's like, well, you're not really giving us any options. Like, we're going to have to work with them. And United States just didn't take that seriously. Well, guess what? Nowadays, you have Iran, a huge major player in the Middle East and a growing world power. You have Russia and China really giving the United States a bloody nose, and the United States desperately wishing that it was not in the situation where it was facing both of them at the same time. But that is the situation we're in. And so, are there any parallels or differences between China's historical antagonism with the West and its current relationship with countries like Iran and Russia? It's in the relationship it is with Iran and Russia. One, due to factors of Russia and China having complementary economies, but two, because all three of these countries were backed into a corner. These are previous world powers who they don't want to be destroyed by the West, and so they have to come together. In terms of historical antagonism, I would say that Russia, to a much larger extent than Iran, was in a situation where it almost acted as a colonial power. It treated China very poorly whenever China was facing the opium crisis and facing their century of humiliation due to places like the United Kingdom importing drugs into China. And so Russia, to a certain extent, did have a relationship with China similar to the West. But after the collapse of the Soviet Union and them realizing that ideological differences don't matter overly much, they reached a conclusion. They reached the point where they just said, listen, let's work together because it's in our best interest to work together. And so there was some parallels. There were some things in common between China's historical antagonism with the West and, I would say, the Soviet Union. But modern day Russia really has mended fences with modern day China so that there's not that historical antagonism. There's not even that remnant of historical antagonism. They're the closest of friends possible. And Iran really didn't have that relationship. Sure, the Persian Empire at various points in history was dominant throughout the region, but it never really got too contentious with places like Russia and like China. And so there wasn't very many parallels there. And I would say that while Russia and China have complementary economies, there was no real reason that Iran had to be in that situation where it had to join that axis. But the United States forced it to. I mean, the United States didn't really give it other options in terms of surviving as a nation. The United States would make deals, they would go back on deals. The United States would negotiate things with Iran, not keep it. The United States would literally steal ships, Iranian ships. They would steal ships going to Iran. They would steal ships that Iran was sending elsewhere, et cetera, et cetera. It was just a complete mess. And Iran really had no choice there. So, are there any parallels or differences between China's historical antagonism with the West and its current relationship with countries like Iran and Russia? I feel like, in terms of differences, China has a much closer relationship with Iran and Russia because of the fact that they have to. Like, they know that the others aren't going to screw them over because of the fact that they don't have other options. This is how things are has to be because of the fact that United States has put them in this situation where they have to work together, and so that builds really close relationships when you know you can trust your partners because they don't have the option of screwing you over given the situation that the West has put them in. And so that is my answer to the question, are there any parallels or differences between China's historical antagonism with the West and its current relationship with countries like Iran and Russia? If you liked my answer to this question and want to hear other question and answer segments, we have more questions and answers that I will be answering in the future, so just stick with us. Thank you, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.